Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Owens. I'm a technical evangelist on the Windows Azure platform team, focused on SQL Azure. In the last few months, I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with the Dallas team in preparation for this big announcement at PDC, and really honored to be here representing the hard work of the team. There's a group that's really been going above and beyond to make this thing happen, and I get to be up here and take the credit, which is nice. So with that, let's get started. A big announcement today. So this new information service that we're launching. So what is it? It's a marketplace in the sense that it's a place to discover and buy data sets and access to web services and subscriptions. And that's all done through Pinpoint. The other key piece of that is that there's a standardized set of APIs. And that's really one of the most fundamental things that is exciting about Dallas. Some of these services in the past you could get from a bunch of different service providers or a bunch of different data providers. But with this standardized set of APIs, you get a familiar programming model. Once you've built an application that can consume one, you can consume others. So it really makes the friction much lower for people looking to develop services against these data sets and web services. And the other piece of it is analytics and reporting. So with data, you always think about analytics and reporting, and Dallas certainly hasn't left that behind. It's not the only thing you can do with it, which we'll see later as well. And another key piece, and it's at the bottom of this slide, is it's all built on the Windows Azure platform. So it's a great proof point that you can build super high scale services all on the Windows Azure platform. And we'll look architecturally a little bit at what we've done to, and how we've built it on the Windows Azure platform. So when we talk about data, what do we mean? So authoritative data, we mean things, information from the UN, information from the prime content providers of this data around the world. We'll see some more logos and look at some data sets to give you a feel for who we've been talking to and have deals with so far. Financial data, images and community reviews, so crowdsource information and user-generated content. And then we basically think about two main categories in Dallas today, and that's commercial data providers. And those are people who are generally in the business of selling data and web services. And then trusted public domain, so that's governments, that's academia. And they curate the data. So in V1 for Dallas, what we're looking at is we're looking to build relationships and partnerships with the prime data providers around the world. And one of those sort of criteria is that there's someone behind it who's making sure it's of a certain quality bar and that you can trust your business building applications on top of it or making critical business decisions. And then in terms of the form that this takes, it's relational data like you'd expect when you think of data. It's also blob data. So there's binary data, images, we'll expect multimedia in the future, and it's web services. So in addition to just that notion of sort of static reference data, which can be updated and very useful, there's a piece of Dallas that can be a front end to a web service and sort of flattens it out, puts it into our standard APIs, and really lowers the bar to consumption. So with that, Dallas, the beauty of Dallas is that you can talk about it in 5 minutes and usually land really what it is. All you do is jump into Service Explorer in the portal and start looking around, and you can do the simple demos. I mean, we saw the stuff Campbell built on stage today at the keynote. Really, 3 lines of code allows you to consume this stuff if you're using some of the service proxy classes that we've built ahead of time, or if you want to explore in Gemini. So really, that's the beauty. So let's start by jumping on one of these demo machines. Which one? Demo B. Oh, C. Okay. Where I actually wanted to start with this thing was on Azure.com. So we are part of the Azure platform. And as of today, there's some new links. So under products, you'll be able to get to link for Dallas on Azure.com, as well as under the developer section. So I didn't warm this baby up. Okay, here we go. So on the developer section, codename Dallas. So from here, a couple interesting things to note. After the session you might want to check out. You could either do the hands-on lab that we have here. We also recently launched a training course on Channel 9 for the whole Azure platform. And here there's some links over on the right-hand side where we've got the hands-on labs. We've got some additional content and videos and things like that. And you can watch that for updates in the future. So then from here, you can find a link to the developer portal. So in case you're wondering where to go, start at azure.com, and that's how you can sort of find the rest of your way through the process. Okay, so on the home screen, basically intro stuff, explains some of how you actually program against this thing. If you look in the catalog, right now you'll notice that the catalog, there's a version of it in Pinpoint, and then there's a version of it in the developer portal itself. And that's just in the CTP phase. We've got it in both places. Pinpoint actually has the notion of catalog syndication as well. So the fact that you see catalog information out of Pinpoint in different places isn't particularly surprising. So if we sort of look at some of these data sets, so AP, that's an interesting one where we actually have a front end on their web service. So we actually flatten it out. We change it into the REST Atom Pub template. It's integrated with all of the sort of tooling that we're building and will continue to build. Data.gov, that's one of the things Vivek, if you caught during the keynote, the CIO, US CIO is really excited about, a project that he started to democratize data and make it more accessible to everyone. Info USA, we saw some stuff that they've got, and NASA, we've got a programming contest we'll talk about later. Esri, we've partnered with them. You know, they're the primary GIS data provider in the world. And a bunch of other partners that we're really excited that we've had the opportunity to work with up till now. And currently, you'll see some of these are coming soon. So we have the data, or we have the deals in place with all of these people. It's just a matter of which ones we've been able to flip over and turn into actual services within the application at this point. So over the coming weeks, you'll see more and more of these come online gradually. So before jumping in to actually explore some of those, we'll, in the subscriptions tab, so you'd subscribe from the catalog, you could subscribe from Pinpoint, then you'd see them in your subscriptions here. And then under account keys, one of the things to keep in mind when programming against Dallas, and Justin will come up here later and show some cool ACS integration. He'll go even deeper into this, but is this notion of account keys. Within the CTP, you can have up to 5 of them, and they're basically sort of a username, password, something you want to keep secure. And something that you can do with them is the reporting, which we'll see over here. So in access reports, these access reports are broken down by account keys. So say you were, had one subscription or one account associated with this Dallas, your Dallas subscription. You could create multiple account keys and give them to different departments within an organization, so you could determine how much a department was consuming the services. There's also the notion of user IDs, which we'll look at when we actually dive into code, which will also be available for analytics in terms of how many users are using the system as well. So account keys is one of the concepts, and those are passed in as HTTP headers, and we'll look at that in some code. Once you're in subscriptions, you have this service browser experience. So we'll take a look at the food and agricultural data set from the UN. So the service browser, the way I think about it is it's basically a tool that you can use during the application development or sort of discovery phase. It's not expected that you'd particularly come here to do your analytics. It's a pretty basic UI for doing that, but it gives you a hands-on experience to really understand what the data is all about. So as you saw earlier, you have the opportunity to preview it, and you can sort of get a feel for what data it is. And it was pointed out earlier that the main protocol that we're using is Atom Pub, so REST APIs on top of Atom Pub, but we also will return raw. So some of these data providers who already have applications or dependencies within the development community on the format that they have natively, we also provide that back. So if you've worked with these folks and move your relationship over through us, we could still not break your apps. So here you get the opportunity to preview. These parameters here are all customized per data set. There's a notion of paging, so you can do that either in the UI here, in the service proxy class we generate, you can do paging. You can pass it in as a parameter through the REST API as well. And that's really what I wanted to show here from the sort of exploration piece. We'll look a little bit more deeply when we dive into some code in a few minutes here, where we'll actually generate a service proxy class and do some actual coding. So that's sort of a lap around the service portal. It's all pretty simple, and that's the beauty of it, really. So, okay, architecture. So how did we build this on top of the Windows Azure platform? I think there's some pretty interesting things, because it's what we're telling people to go do, and it's what we've done ourselves. So no mismatch between that, which is good to see. So because I'm a data guy, I'll start down at the bottom left hand of the slide here. So in terms of storage, we're storing our binary data in Windows Azure blobs, and then we're storing the relational data and metadata for those blobs, that sort of thing, in SQL Azure databases. And one of the cool things about it is we are actually using a database scale-out architecture. So all of our data sets, we have multiple copies of those databases within SQL Azure, and then the front ends, which connect, which are the APIs, they actually use like a load balancing sort of technique to figure out which database to connect to. So we have a bunch of databases, multiple databases of each. We can scale up and down based on whatever data set seems to be the hottest. We could create more copies and just increase that. So the other interesting piece of this, I think, is if you look at the top in the APIs and portal, we're using Windows Azure web roles for the APIs for the portal and then for the actual service endpoints. And again, there we can just tune that up and turn it down whenever we need to. So basically that's the main part of the architecture. Again, these third-party web services, they may have their own data stores and we have our APIs on top of that. And then we have ACS over here for integration with security, and Justin will talk more deeply about that. And then the schema management piece and integration pipeline, this is one of the things that will continue to evolve currently. The integration pipeline is some devs working very closely with content providers and figuring out what the data transformations need to look like, loading those up in a more, it takes some time, so it's not a really automated thing at this point. But one of the things we're looking at doing in the future is adding more of a self-management experience through the schema management and the integration pipeline so that we can scale the ability to work with more data providers. So why do we think this is important to developers? And really, it's all about removing the friction to consuming data. And there's friction in a lot of ways. It's discovery of data, knowing what's out there. It's the ability to program against a clean, consistent set of APIs if you're actually trying to consume multiple data sets. And then it's having a business model that makes sense. So whether you want, we'll talk more about business models later, but whether you're doing like a pay-as-you-grow or a subscription-style business model, I think we're coming up with some things that really lower the bar and lower friction. A lot of these data sets in the past were too big of deals to actually provide to the broad developer community. It was a much more specific business engagement between organizations, whereas we're making it more of that marketplace and removing a lot of friction. So it's very exciting. So what are some sample types of scenarios where you could actually use Dallas data? So this right here, I've got a screenshot of a Plan My Night application, which if you all are Visual Studio developers and stay up to date with the latest and greatest, you may have seen this within the Visual Studio 2010 training kit, which a group in DP, some of my colleagues have built. So Plan My Night is a sample application that is based on the Bing API. So using Bing for the maps and for the real-time turn-by-turn directions through some of the restaurant information. So that's what you can do today, but really Dallas can enable you to light up some of these applications with some of the new data sets and services. So you can do things like show times, predictive parking, restaurant reviews, real-time weather. So it's not just about what you can do just with Dallas data, but it's what can you do within your applications to light them up with Dallas and sort of extending that. So let's look at a couple of quick demos on what it's like to actually build some, get into some code here. Okay, so these are all just really simple coding demos. So what we've got is we'll do a WinForms app, then we'll do a VB app, and then we'll do some JavaScript. So here, one of the cool things that you can do is this notion of joining data sets. You know, we have some ideas on what the future of that might look like, but currently you can still do it. So what you would do now is we've actually got this code written, and it was funny. So we were working on this demo the other day, and I was working with Christian, who's sitting around here, and he was coding this up. We were actually working on the slides, and I thought he was doing email or something like that. And I told him sort of some ideas what I had for this demo, and literally 5 minutes later, he turns it around, and he's like, is this what you want? And he did this join while I thought he was doing email. So it's a testament to him being a smart guy and to the fact that this really isn't that difficult. So basically, let's just jump into this. Okay, so that breakpoint is going to be triggered when I load this up, and it's just a simple sort of data grid UI that we're building up, but I wanted to show what some of this code looks like. Okay, so the screen resolution's a little small there. So basically what we do is this, creating a new instance of this service object. So this was generated through the service proxy class earlier. I should have started in Service Explorer and clicked on it, but basically at the bottom left of every single data set that you explore, it will generate a C# class that allows you to consume the data with an object model. And an interesting thing about this one in particular is that this object model actually, I should have clicked on it. So if you have a data set that has multiple sort of sub data sets, I guess they would be called, I can't think of how we call them, but so within the UN food and agricultural data set, there's a bunch of subsets of data within there. So when you generate that proxy class, you actually get all of them. So you can, from this, including this one file, you can do a bunch of things with different data sets from that same series. So what we're doing is creating a new instance of that thing here. We're passing in an account key and our user ID. Then all it is to step through this, I think I actually hit F11 instead of F10. So let me restart this debugging here. I think I stepped into, sorry about that. F5. Okay, where are we? We're debugging. All right, let's start that again. So, create a new instance of this object, and then really all it is the next line, we're invoking that. So here you can see we're passing in a parameter. This particular data set is country and year, so we're limiting it by the given country. So we're getting one data set that's our forestry production data from the UN, and then this next data set is the paper production for that. So you'd expect to see a correlation between forestry and paper production. So we're just going out and invoking those. So those two lines of code is really all it takes, is create an instance of it, invoke the service, pass in some parameters. And now what we're doing is a join. So we're doing an in-memory join and a link query across that. So since the service proxy class has generated an IEnumerable list, we're able to join these things up like you would expect if you're writing link. It's super simple. And then we're actually just binding it to the grid, and there you go. So as you can see there, it's really quite easy. You can join up these data sets in memory with link. Simple. So let's take a look at another application. So set as start as debug. Okay. So VB. If you didn't want to use the service proxy classes that we've generated, for one, if you're using VB and we haven't generated those for you yet, you can actually do this just by going through the REST API like you would if it was any other REST API. So let's take a look. This is a simple console app written in VB. So basically we're pointing it at the service endpoint here. And then you might notice that the service, each data provider has their own service endpoint. And then we're looking at the FAO there. That's the food and agricultural data set. And we're passing in another key. So that's like the series key for that specific series that we want to look at within that data set. So then we're adding an account key. Normally you'd protect this like you would any best practice of protecting passwords within your application. Generating a new user ID, you oftentimes do that with a given user ID. You might not generate a new GUID every time you run this thing. And then just doing basic web XML processing through VB. Here we're adding the headers to the HTTP header. We're adding the account key and unique user ID to the HTTP header. Again, and you want to do that. We put them in the HTTP headers so that if you're ever passing around URLs, you don't want to have your account keys embedded there and then cache on your machine and that sort of thing. And then just, typical processing this thing. So nothing too interesting past that. We're doing some looking at the XML, and then we're doing a link to XML query and just showing the results. So like you'd expect, you can write simple program against this like any other REST API. So, and let's do one more. So in JavaScript, you can do the same thing, and you get JavaScript debugging in Visual Studio, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and look at that. Same thing, service proxy endpoint, same sort of pattern that you would use on the other one, passing in the account key, then creating a function here in a moment that will catch the results of this thing. And I'm in my VB solution, aren't I? Oh, I know what I did. I didn't debug the right one. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this thing will load up, and I just have to. So I'm invoking the JavaScript right now. Basically doing, like I said, same pattern. It looks the same. That's why I couldn't tell going through the last time. You're basically doing the same stuff, but you can do it from JavaScript. And the real message here is not particularly that you can do this from JavaScript or VB or from any given language, but the message here is that it's flexible and you can do it from any language. So whether you're a PHP developer, a Java developer, .NET, the REST APIs make this open and flexible. So that's really what the message is here, is that you can consume this on any device, any form factor, and it's not too difficult. Okay, so with that, Justin will be up in a moment here. So just wanted to sort of land some of what are the benefits for developers. So it's about having the one marketplace for discovery, the one billing relationship. It's access to these multi-million-dollar data sets and web services that, again, instead of putting lawyers on a plane to go talk to your people, maybe you don't even have people, I don't know. You can actually get to them by just signing up for the service and picking what you want to consume and just go ahead and do it. And then the message about from anywhere, from any programming language, any device, it's all very open. So with that, Justin, if you want to come up and show us about ACS. And Justin's demos are much more involved, so we'll actually get to see some real code being cut here. I think it's the next one.
All right. There we go. How y'all doing? Very good. My name is Justin Smith, and I'm a program manager on the Access Control Service team. It's good to be here. This is a really exciting project to get to work on. And I'm really thrilled to be here talking about it. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about how the Access Control Service and Dallas integrate. And this integration is important and interesting in two key scenarios. Let's say you want to access Dallas data, except instead of using an account key to get access to that data, you want to use an enterprise identity. Like let's say you have Active Directory, right? And you've got Active Directory Federation server inside your enterprise, right? You would like to be able to use that identity to access Dallas data. If you're anything like me, you've already got a lot of usernames and passwords. I counted one time, I have over 300 usernames and passwords on the web. I really don't want more. I'd love to be able to reuse an existing identity, right? So ACS is great for integrating with corporate and enterprise directories, right? That's scenario one. Second scenario that this is interesting is through the ACS integration, you can grant trading partners access to your Dallas data feed on your behalf, right? So if I've got 100 or 1,000 trading partners, I can use this integration to have very fine-grained control over which of those trading partners have access. So it's all about enterprise identity and also simple delegation. All right. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of demos. We're going to do a really simple walkthrough of the bare bones ACS and Dallas integration, and then we're going to fold into that demo the enterprise integration, right? So we're starting simple, and then we're going to add enterprise integration. I'm going to intentionally hold off on showing you the delegation. There is a talk tomorrow that I'm going to give on the Access Control Service, and we spend quite a bit of time on delegation there. Sorry for the shameless plug, but if you come, I'm sure it'll change your life. And we're also going to touch on another technology called Windows Identity Foundation, or WIF. I don't call it WIF, it's WIF, right? And if you have questions around WIF, you can talk to me, and there's also a session tomorrow, I believe it is, by Harvey Wilson. It promises to be a very good one, but it probably won't change your life the way the ACS one will, right? So if you got, I'm just going to kind of gloss over some of those technologies and drill into them tomorrow. All right, so let's get into some code. We're going to start on my account keys page. right? So this is a separate page. This is my own Dallas account that I got. You'll see that I've created a couple of keys. I can go create a new one, but rather than create a new one, I'm going to just show you what I've already set up. Now, what's interesting around this key is it's got a description, right? And I've called it Justin PDC demo key. I'm not that colorful to come up with fancy names. And I've clicked this checkbox to say, enable this key for ACS integration. Behind that checkbox and behind that button, there's some code that goes out to the access control service and registers the key with the access control service, right? So the key is registered inside of Dallas, and it's also at the access control service. Really simple, really straightforward, right? And that's all I have to do. I have to create a key and enable it for the access control service to get started. Real simple. Oh, there's one more piece of data that I need, and that is my project ID. Right? And I'll show you how that folds into the mix in just a second. Right? So I need my key description, the key value, and the project ID. Now let's take a look at the code. This 101 kind of demo, while it has a few more than 3 lines of code, is still really, really simple. Right? Instead of 3 lines of code, we've added about 15 lines of code. Right? So we're at about 18. Add all the using directives, it's roughly 60-ish lines. Right? I'm just going to go ahead and start the app. Step 1 is to go get a token from the access control service, right? So I'm going to step into my very well-named method there for get a token from the access control service. And the programming model for ACS is really simple. Has anybody in here used ACS before? I see a few hands. All right. Well, we're using a new protocol. As of November 5th, we switched over to a new protocol, and it's called OAuth WRAP. Right? WRAP is a great name for Web Resource Authorization Protocol. It's much easier to say WRAP, right? So Microsoft, we got together, my team got together with Google and Yahoo, and we helped build a new profile for OAuth, and we've submitted it to the OAuth IETF working group, right? So this protocol, the code here, is really simple, and it conforms to OAuth WRAP, approximately. I knew up a web client. I set the base address to the Dallas Access Control Service namespace. Right, and that's dallas.accesscontrol.windows.net. This data is all sent over HTTPS. And then I create a few parameters. All I'm trying to do is do a form post to that URI. One of the parameters is my key description. And the parameter name is wrap_name. The actual key value, the parameter name there is wrap_password. Couldn't be any simpler. Right? Even I can write the code. The next thing that we'll want to pass as a parameter contains the project ID, right? And those 3 pieces of data just help ACS look up and authenticate the request. We also pass a couple of other parameters that allow us later to turn on delegation. And then I simply call client.uploadValues. And what I get back is a wonderful byte array, and I can turn that into a string. And what we see is a token. Now this is my favorite name of the OAuth WRAP. There's also SWT, or SWT, Simple Web Token, right? And you can see it's a human readable token right now, and it's just a set of name value pairs that have an HMAC SHA-256 signature applied to it. Now the Dallas service can parse and understand and validate this signature because it has the key. It's in possession of the key. And it uses the data that's in this token to authenticate the request. Real simple. Real straightforward. From there, I just new up one of these service proxies, passing the token, and then I go make a query. All right? And so when this returns, we're going to print the results to the console, and there you go. That's the ACS integration in its simplest form. Real simple, real straightforward. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. I promise I'm not on an infomercial. So from there, let's turn on enterprise integration. What do you say? Has anybody worked with ADFS before? Active Directory Federation Server? I see like 10 hands maybe, right on. Right? So we're going to add ADFS integration into this app, and we're not going to bloat the size of this app. Right? So we're going to go from what was about 60 lines of code now to about 120 lines of code. Now there's some configuration and some setup that's required to do this. I find it easiest to just talk about the runtime behavior rather than the setup, right? I'll talk about the setup and why it is set up that way tomorrow in my talk. But here's the flow, real simple. Let's say I've got an app, and that app is running in my domain. I want that app to go out and request a token from ADFS. This is a SAML token, so I do a WS Trust RST, request for security token. I get back an RSTR. I parse the SAML token out of that RSTR. That's step one, go get a SAML token. Then I send that SAML token up to the access control service, right? So my organization will have created an ACS service namespace that's independent of the Dallas ACS service namespace. So I get a token from my ADFS server. I then post that token up to the access control service. It then returns to me a SWAT. And then I take that SWAT and I send it to the Dallas ACS service namespace in exchange for another SWAT. And then I send it to Dallas, right? So there's 3 legs. We're basically adding 2 token requests. Get the SAML token, exchange it for a SWAT, exchange it for another SWAT that's trusted by Dallas, right? So there's just a little bit more code to write, and we'll walk through it right now. All right, step 1, get a SAML token. So here, we're using Windows Identity Foundation, just a few lines of code. And I'm going to create a request for security token object. The only trick here is I got to make sure to use a bearer token, request a bearer token. Set the applies to, I'm going to get back a SAML token if the demo gods are still with me, which I feel that they are. I feel the warmth right now. Everyone thinking positively, thank you very much. And there I've got a SAML token. Now this is really cool. In case you don't believe me, there's a SAML token. And guess who that is? That's me, Redmond Whack Justin SM. My security context was used to go get a SAML token. Real simple, real straightforward. All right. Next, I go send that SAML token to the access control service. This code should look very familiar. The only difference is instead of using wrap name and wrap password, I say wrap SAML. That's the parameter name. And I go get the response, and this has returned to me a SWAT, right? It's another one of these human readable tokens. And then I go send that SWAT to the Dallas ACS service. I'm just going to skip over that because you've seen that code before, right? Now I go invoke the proxy, query the data set, and there's all the data. Now, I've been in the security space for a while. I can't tell you how happy I am to show you right out of the gate with the Dallas CTP that we've got in the box enterprise integration with enterprise identity providers like Active Directory. This is literally 80 to 90% of the enterprises out there use Active Directory, right? So this automatically gives you reach into those organizations. So I don't know, when I first saw this, I cried a little bit. But anyway, maybe you don't have that same response. But anyway, we do have a session tomorrow on ACS. I'll also be in the .NET Services booth. If you got any questions, comments, or personal attacks, I'd love to hear them. Thanks a lot, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yeah, so one thing that's striking to me about the fact that we've, right out of the gate with Dallas, done the ACS integration, really, I believe speaks to the fact that at Microsoft, we understand the vision for the cloud, we understand what it means to extend on-prem to the cloud, and we are making that a priority for everything that we're doing. So I think it's great to see that it's right out of the gate, something we've done. So what are some futures? You know, there's going to be a bunch of things coming online in this CTP, and the things we're thinking about are generally enhanced query support, and that's in a few different ways. Currently, we expose a limited set of the fields within a data set that you can query on, that you can actually limit the results from. So we're looking at adding more of the entire field set to that, and then integration with Visual Studio. So just tight integration with our tooling, and then we're looking at additional formats, JSON being one of the ones that's top of mind, and CSV potentially, and really we're not putting any bounds on that. So from an information worker perspective, everyone here is probably more of a developer than an IW, so really the way that I like to think about this is that people in your organization, if they start hearing about Dallas, or maybe you're going to go back to them and you're going to want to tell some business users within your organization about Dallas because it may apply directly to them. It's sort of, what do you need to know and how can you think about it, and what are we doing for the IW play on this as well? So, and I think the key tenets for IW is they don't want to get out of their workflow. Generally, they're not looking to learn a bunch of new technology and tools. So that's why making integration with Office was a big priority for us, and which we've done through Power Pivot. And it's some of the same principles as a developer. It's that information discovery and trust. And then really, it's again, so if you've got an enterprise application and you want to keep that on-prem, we're allowing you to reach out into the cloud through Dallas and actually get access to the large data sets that we've got and the big deals we've been able to do to bring that data to you. So it's really, again, with the Microsoft vision. So today, again, you could build an app with using your data, and maybe you pull in demographics, or you did some site planning up front for business analytics, what was competition in the area, stuff you've been able to do. Then with Dallas, you may be able to pull in some things that you might not have had access to or easy access to, especially integration with your analytics tools. So maybe you want to monitor new businesses coming in. That's one of our Info USA data sets. Maybe you want weather. So this is your October sales. Say maybe the red line there was a drop in sales and you don't know why. Maybe you could land weather on top of that and see that you were trying to sell cold drinks on an unseasonably cold day. Or maybe there are user-generated content, like reviews and that sort of thing. So you're trying to figure out, why is one restaurant doing better than the other? So it's some of those new scenarios. And Power Pivot. So it's a pretty simple demo as well for the Power Pivot stuff. Basically similar to what you saw earlier. So all you have to do to invoke Power Pivot is click on the Analyze button. And if people are familiar with Power Pivot, it's an add-in to Excel, which is part of the SQL Server 2008 R2 CTP. So I believe there's a CTP coming around this time, and there are some that have already come out as well. So Power Pivot basically allows you to consume Atom data feeds. It's one of sort of its key tenets, which we're exposing reporting services reports in the same way. So data from Dallas looks the same as you would consume a bunch of different data sets that we expect to be used within Power Pivot. And within here, just a couple clicks and you'll get the data set right in memory. So currently what I'm doing is just sucking in one data set, but what I could do very easily within Gemini is I could go out to another UN data set, especially because we know how it joins. That would be an easy one to do. Pull that in and quickly build a relationship. And one of the things with Power Pivot is it's an in-memory column-based BI engine, so it's super fast. If you were doing big data set analytics, it's lightning fast. It's really impressive. So with that sort of real quick ability, you can see how we're lowering the bar for an information worker as well to actually suck this stuff in and do something interesting with it. And the sort of things that we're looking at for the future. So deeper integration with reporting services, and it just makes sense. I mean, they're doing things right now, exposing their data through these Atom feeds. So it's a matter now of sort of when can we get that integration done in terms of sprint to the next release. Tighter integration with Office. I mean, you could see a discovery experience within Office that would also be really valuable to lower that bar and that friction for an information worker. And then also getting into enterprise licensing and actually making it a lot easier to work out the business relationships between Microsoft and some of these data providers and the people within your organization. And content providers. One thing that's interesting for us is that because the service, what we had to do to make this valuable is we had to actually work very closely with content providers. So that's really what the team has been doing the majority of for the last month since we envisioned this service. So this is really the first time that we're actually opening this up to developers. So we're really interested to get your perspective on it. But we've been talking to content providers a lot and people are excited about it. So, and really it's all about the Microsoft reach and scale, the ability to go through our sales channels and really open up a whole new world of opportunity. And oftentimes it's in that long tail with some of these premium data providers. The building those business relationships between organizations takes a lot of time, whereas we've sort of democratize this and put it in the marketplace and lowered a lot of that friction for everyone in the mix here. And what we're looking at, so we've had to focus on getting some of the premium content providers in the industry onboarded onto Dallas, but as we look to the future, what we want to do, and I sort of mentioned it in the architecture slide, was lower the barrier for additional content providers to become part of the process. So that's things like the ability to upload your data set and map to known schemas and services, and the ability to manage the updates to your data and making that experience much more seamless for you. So if you're a data provider and you're interested in working with Dallas, I definitely recommend coming to the booth and getting in touch with us. We'll throw up an email address at the end here that you can come ask us questions at. And business model, it's top of mind for everyone. You know, I'd say come have discussions with us. It'll be interesting to hear what your perspective is on this thing. But there's some tenets of things you can expect, and that's free trials. So we're working really closely with all of our data providers to allow some trial experience for development and for just seeing what this thing looks like. We're looking at transaction-based and subscription-based pricing. So it's not per like row return, but it's actually more per query, or it's a certain monthly amount, so subscription or transaction. And so that plays to the same thing. So either pay as you grow, maybe you're just doing transactions, or maybe you decide you're going to consume a certain amount per month, and then you can consume within a data set. And the other important thing here is that we're really dedicated to making this accessible to everyone, whether you're in the enterprise or whether you're a small shop, a startup that's got some great idea. That's one of the beauties, I believe, of Dallas, is the fact that it's really lowering the bar for playing in this game. And easy to understand licensing, which I thought that was kind of funny to put up there because we're Microsoft. So it's a goal. We'll see. And details will be coming around the mix time frame, we believe, so early next calendar year. And roadmap. So today, there's a limited free CTP, and the way you can get a token for that is to go do a hands-on lab in the big area upstairs. So come see us at the booth and get access through a token. And then up here, so Q1 of next year, we're looking at having the business details nailed down, and we're additionally onboarding content providers. And then we're looking at commercial availability in the first half of next year. So with that, the developers, I said, the hands-on lab, and then participation in this NASA Pathfinder Challenge. Go check it out, this URL. I think it'll be interesting to see what developers build on some of the NASA data that they're hosting in Dallas. And then content providers come talk to us. Here's some resources, and what I wanted to do was we have a number of people from the product group. We've got Mo Khosravi, who's the group manager, and Roger Mall, who's the biz dev lead. They're going to come up here, and for Q&A, we've got a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions. Yeah, so if you just jump up to one of these mics here, and that way it gets recorded. And
this is for Justin. Does the XAML token have security group information or just the user ID information?
So the question is, the SAML token that comes back is purely up to the ADFS configuration, right? So you can opt in. If you're the enterprise admin, you can say that I want to have security group information, or I only want to have user IDs, and I don't want to have any other attribute information. I can add email. So it's totally configurable inside of ADFS.
So is the security policy on the Dallas side rich enough to describe something more than owner? Because all the things look like you either have access or don't have access to the data set. Can it be richer than that?
That's a great question. So today, the way that we treat this in ACS is it's a true or false. You either have or don't have access. You can add more policy into that ACS solution that sits in the middle, that service namespace that sits in the middle, and you can make that really fine grained, right? So I could say Justin SM has access on Tuesday, right? But this other security group has very broad access, right? That's still kind of a true-false kind of a question, or a true-false kind of an answer, but there's a lot of knobs in there that you can turn to say you either have or don't have access.
One more question.
Yep.
Is there a way to find out what has changed in the data set since the last time I queried?
That's a great question. So From a content provider perspective, I mean, there's synchronization support in there as well to be able to figure out, what are the deltas, so you're not consuming the entire data set. The actual synchronization metadata in the feeds are not exposed yet, but that's going to be coming out in the future CTP.
Okay. And so is there some mechanism to prevent people from copying the entire thing? Or is it only for public domain?
No, it's basically, you're getting into the business model in terms of, can I do caching? Can I do, can I download this data? That's basically some of the details that we're going to be talking about at Mix and at the booth in terms of, for instance, for a given content, can I actually have offline capabilities with this, right? And that will be enabled through subscription licensing, but for instance, it wouldn't make any sense to do it on a per transaction basis, right?
All right, thank you.
Definitely.
I've got a couple of questions that are a little bit on the business side. As far as what data sets get brought into this service, is that something that's kind of up to Microsoft to kind of set up what the data sets will be as far as, obviously you've got some initial ones, but as far as hopefully you'll be getting lots and lots more. So is it like basically Microsoft sets up business relationships to put those in there?
It's a great question. So far, what we've been doing, obviously we've been flying under the radar with the Dallas project and kind of reaching out in terms of who's the leader in, say, navigation, for instance, residential real estate, et cetera, and really reaching out to onboard that content within Azure. Now that basically the project is unveiled, we really want to hear from content providers in terms of what the data is, describe it, what scenarios it fulfills, and really onboard, engage with our team to figure out how we can get that data in.
Will that be like Microsoft can have the decision of whether to accept a provider or not, kind of like Apple does with their App Store for the iPhone?
So I'll take that one. I'm Roger. And before I answer that, the one thing I wanted to add to what Mo was saying was the way we want you to leave here this week when you think about Dallas is not Dallas is this cool thing, but it's got data for mapping or for demographics or for a couple siloed areas. Where we really are going with this, and this is really a key thing that we need to make sure everyone understands and what we execute on, is that when you walk away from Dallas, you're thinking, here's this really cool thing which has data all the way across a broad spectrum of all types of data. So that's the conclusion to what Mo was saying. For your question about what type of data and are we going to exercise editorial judgment on data, to some extent, as Zach mentioned, we recognize that people are going to be using this data to make and basically base their business on. So we will be doing some editorial review of data as we go on, and as the community starts to build up around that, we expect that we'll be able to back away a little bit so we can build a more broadly scalable model, but initially we'll be much more hands-on.
And then as a consumer of the data, will I be paying the money directly to the source of the data, or do I pay it to Microsoft who relays it on?
So we will take, that's actually another thing that to Zach's point is with a common billing. So we will take and broker that deal with the consumer of the data. So from your perspective, you'll have a single Dallas bill, regardless of the data that you select or consume that period, and then we'll go and manage that relationship to making sure that the data providers get their royalty and their cut.
Does the code gen stuff work if you're doing raw data, or is it just for the Atom format?
Yeah. It's just for Atom right now.
Okay. Is that stuff interfaced by any chance for us TDD guys?
What's that?
Is the generated code interface based so that I can mock it?
That's a great idea. In terms of actually being able to extend, to be able to get raw support?
Just for testing it so that I don't have to hit live data while I'm making sure my stuff works.
That'd be a great feature request. Thanks.
I think one of the interesting things there is there's a lot of opportunity right now to provide feedback from a developer's perspective on what are the things that the team has missed and just trying to get the service up there and get content providers on board. And from a developer perspective, what are the things that the team could do to really make it a big win for developers? And right now is the first time we've really talked to people about it.
So I've done a bunch of work in the past with voter files, and they're always a huge mess. Are you guys taking on the responsibility of massaging data and making data sets homogeneous? Or I know, like, for instance, with Wolfram Alpha, they employ quite a large number of people to massage their data, right? And
I'm sure we'd love to massage voter data. I imagine some controversy.
no, you would not. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing.
No, it's a great one. Actually, so one of the things that we kind of glossed over was the entire data.un within Dallas. That was, I think, 1,400 databases basically that were curated, but not necessarily by us, right? That's part of the onboarding process in terms of you content provider, you know your data best. How should it be exposed, right? __ CRID joined with some other field isn't really the best way to get, say, crime data out or like the FAO data. So that's kind of where we work with the content provider to figure out, what are the table value functions, for instance, if it's structured data, what is the stored procedure, what are the parameters that should come in and what should go out, basically. So curation happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be Microsoft that does it.
Also, in terms of allowing access to certain people to certain data, like let's say you were the DoD and you wanted to only allow people that have a certain level of clearance access. Are you guys thinking about some sort of system to handle limited access?
That's a great one. Actually, we were running into this with several content providers where we call it a private marketplace. So, this big iTunes for data and web services that we have right now is going to work for a lot of the partners. But at the same time, as you mentioned, pharmaceutical sales, gaming, sports, even real-time feeds effectively are going to want to be controlled. And yeah, we're working out that strategy right now. For instance, what should the security model be across all content providers that they would actually have to build and host to be able to get that out? Because again, we want to make sure we even take out friction for private marketplaces as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
2 questions. One, how do you handle model changes in your API? Like somebody is a content provider and they release version 1 and it has certain columns in certain order, and then they're going to version 2. Is there something inherent in the system, or is it just something that you have to look up a certain table and know what you're working with?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great one. Don't do it. No, it's interface based, right? To where if we have dynamically changed data and someone actually wants to maintain control over, say, the database of the blob store, it's going to be understood that the data is going to have to match the interface that's actually exposed. So if a content provider goes out and deletes schemas, that information is going to get lost. But I mean, it won't break the system. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that's kind of part of the onboarding process to figure out, how frequently are you going to update the data, what breaking changes, version control, lifetime management, age outs, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. And then also, since Microsoft's going to be involved with the building process, what will be the process for problem management? Like if someone's consuming data and they, going to the previous person's question about scrubbing data, if they noticed, something's wrong, is there a reporting mechanism through Dallas, or is it that you have to actually converse with the direct provider?
We actually have both capabilities. So if a content provider realizes abuse on a given data set, they have the capability of notifying us, and we can turn off that key pretty immediately, as well as we have the capability ourselves to be able to do that. And absolutely, everything that's going on within the system, whether it's like BI, whether it's reporting, or raw programmatic access to the content, is being watched. I mean, in the sense of reporting and capturing for auditing, logging, and billing purposes by us.
Is the auditing process also exposed? Is there anything where a user who made a request one moment can be on some kind of subscription that says, hey, the data you got 5 minutes ago, it actually changed due to a problem request, or is that in the system?
That's part of the access reporting that we were we quickly glossed over, mm-hmm. to be able to get a real-time dashboard in terms of what you're doing. And some of the other things that we didn't dive into are like being able to set usage limits, spend no more than this much money, across monthly or, across these data sets, and being able to have really fine, control over that. As far as problems, if a transaction didn't roll back, didn't commit, if you Your question is basically, I imagine, for billing, right? If there was an issue.
Well,
am I gonna be
My
billed?
question's more if I'm a consumer of the data and I've noticed that something doesn't make sense with what I pulled down, or if maybe data that I expected to be available isn't available, who do I speak to about dealing with those kind of problems?
That's actually one of the great things that we got by partnering with Pinpoint is our marketplace. They have a complete, kind of like an Amazon review system where, you know, you can go in and say things like their star ratings on the data. You can leave comments for us and the content provider to start that feedback mechanism.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Any thoughts on supporting read-write type of APIs?
Read writes. In what scenario?
Let's say I'm providing local business data and I want to allow people who are consuming that data to then submit reviews or something from users, or create users that kind of flow through our system, and then allow them to then add content back to the system instead of just consuming it.
That's a great, these are all great questions. I think, and really good feedback in terms of what you guys are looking for. So far, what we've been looking at with things that are read-write are really treating them as two different stores. Like two different products, if you will. Like, for instance, reviews are going to come in structured, and that's going to be frequently updated on behalf of some partner that's giving access to their users, right? So that's supported, but we're not going to actually introduce write capabilities from our APIs. It's you as a content provider, if you will, or an ISV that's actually going to give access to that data, right? Great. Yes.
No microphone?
I don't think it's on.
Yeah, it is now.
I think it just got turned on if you.
Oh. There we go.
From a scale,
I can hear you fine.
from a scale point of view, are we looking at content that would be updated yearly, quarterly, daily, hourly, minutely?
Yes.
All the above?
No, yes, absolutely. I mean, like
Sub-second?
real-time news from associated feeds, right?
Okay.
I mean, like cached news would be a horrible thing. But then, you know, you've got things like not city search, but United Nations, where, you know, or census data to be, you know, that much. We've got cache and controls on that data to really figure out what the frequency of updates are and that sort of thing. But it is truly
But all the way down to real time?
Exactly. That's right.
And scale? I mean, thousands of sensors?
I mean,
or?
I think Vivek kind of, you know, set the stage in terms of all data.gov being a part of Dallas, all, you know, all the NASA imagery. We're looking at hundreds of terabytes and just kind of growing out.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Can't see anything.
I think we're good. Well, we just hit the top of the session time, so probably a good time to wrap up.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.